Welcome back, everyone. This will be my non-spoilery House of the Dragon Episode 1 review. I was invited to the premiere, so I have seen Episode 1. If you're brand new to the channel, I'll be doing videos for all the episodes just like I did for the main Game of Thrones show, so be sure to subscribe to get all those. But it felt really good to go back to Westeros. House of the Dragon starts a little under 200 years before the events of the main show, and it's set during the height of Targaryen power in Westeros, when they had the most dragons, the most political power, the most respect, just physically the greatest actual number of Targaryens existing together on screen at the same time, as opposed to the main show where you really only had Daenerys, her brother Viserys for a little while, RIP, and then Jon Snow. Of all the different time periods they could have done for this show, they said that they wanted to set the show during a period in history just before the bloom came off the rose for the Targaryen family, so to speak. Like this was the beginning of the end for their family. And a big part of that was them having a huge civil war where like half of them tried to kill the other half. One of the things they do try to do during the first episode is let you know that one of the most dangerous things for the Targaryens is other Targaryens. And even though there's a ton of very familiar stuff, there are several moments during the show, particularly episode 1, items, lines of dialogue that are meant to be direct references to the main Game of Thrones show, characters from the main show later in the timeline, things that they'll do, big things that will happen to them. Interestingly enough, I was surprised to see that there were a lot of direct references to the actual books themselves separate from the show. There'll be several moments during episode 1 where even if you're not like a huge book reader, you'll be pointing at the screen going full meme, like, he said the thing, he said the thing. He said it! He said it! It felt like there was meant to be just enough hand-holding in episode 1 and doing it in a way that I think will make it easy for people who didn't watch the original Game of Thrones show to start brand new with House of the Dragon. But even if you're not a super fan of the Song of Ice and Fire books and you just watch the Game of Thrones episodes, you will still pick up a lot of the references that they make to the events of the main show. The story is mostly based on the Fire and Blood book, which is basically like a history book written as a history book. It's not written as a novel like the Song of Ice and Fire novels, it's written like an actual history book, just about the Targaryen family and the things that happened to them during different periods in history. But one of the other differences from the main A Song of Ice and Fire novels is that it's not written in first-person perspective, it's written by a third party, or a couple of third parties, that are trying to remember things that happened, so they wind up getting a lot of things wrong or incomplete, and it winds up being a very subjective tale about this family during these periods in history. Whereas during the main Song of Ice and Fire novels like Game of Thrones, Storm of Swords, Clash of Kings, each of the chapters is written in first-person perspective, so you're getting way more of what the characters are actually thinking and feeling as things are happening to them. So what they said that they aimed to do when they were doing this series was to give you a more objective tale about what actually happened. So they're taking like an old maester's remembrance of what happened and giving you more of that objective A Song of Ice and Fire treatment where you get more of what each of the characters is thinking and feeling during all these events. I think during Fire and Blood, there's like an old maester and like a court jester that wind up telling most of the story during that. George R. R. Martin wrote it this way on purpose, so the show is just trying to fill in a lot of those gaps. And if it wasn't clear, this actually started life as George R. R. Martin's show, like he's the person who developed it. He hired the showrunner before HBO ever learned about the show. They worked on it for a while, then he brought it to HBO and said, hey, make this show. So he brought the showrunner to HBO themselves, and Ryan Condal is the person who does most of the writing. Miguel Sapochnik, the other showrunner you remember, was the director of some of the best episodes of Game of Thrones. He's mostly focused with like the practical aspects of making the show and just the way that they actually film it. He did Hardhome, Battle of the Bastards, The Winds of Winter, but throughout all of it, George R. R. Martin was helping make a lot of decisions about what they did with the actual show. So he has way more control over this show and the other spin-offs that they plan on doing, the other prequels they plan on doing, than he did during the main show. So this is very much George R. R. Martin's show in the way that the main show wasn't. All the main cast are totally new actors to the show who weren't on the main show because this is set so much earlier in the timeline. But the way George R. R. Martin does a lot of his world building in A Song of Ice and Fire is that across history, there are a lot of recurring names, motifs with different generations, like families will reuse names across generations. So there will be names on the show that pop up and sound familiar, like there'll be a lot of familiar houses, but during this period in history, a lot of the main characters are from great houses that you didn't see a lot from in the main show. So like the Starks, the Lannisters, the Baratheons, for instance, are present during the events of this show, but they're not nearly as big of characters as the Targaryens, the Valerians, or the Hightowers. The Hightowers basically control Old Town, that's where the Maester's citadel is. We saw a little bit of that during the main show. The Valerians are a vassal house of House Targaryen. They also descend from Valyrian blood, which is why they all have white hair. During the events of the show, the Sea Snake is one of the main characters, and he's meant to be like one of the greatest naval commanders in the history of Westeros. During this part of the timeline, they're also one of the richest families in Westeros because they earn a lot of their money from the sea trade in this area. So even though there are a lot of very familiar sites and places that we'll visit in this show, a lot of the main locations that we'll visit are meant to be brand new locations that we heard about during the main show but never actually visited. For instance, Driftmark, which is meant to be the home of the Velaryons, which is right next to Dragonstone here, and we'll also spend a lot more time at Dragonstone. But even though there's a whole bunch of new places, a whole bunch of new characters, and a bunch of great houses that you didn't see that much during the main show, the way things flowed in episode 1, it didn't feel that confusing. They didn't try to throw too much at you at once. So if you're brand new to the show, or if you have a hard time with that kind of stuff, don't worry. Even though there are a lot of characters, arguably the most important 3 characters on the show are Rhaenyra Targaryen, Alicent Hightower, and Daemon Targaryen. The series starts much earlier in the timeline, so they aren't jumping backwards and forwards all the time. They start earlier and then they'll jump forward later, I think around halfway through the episodes, and you'll get the older versions of the characters. And I think of all the main characters, only Rhaenyra and Alicent have younger actresses and older actresses both playing the character, because it's about 10 years later in the timeline, and when you pick up with the characters, they're meant to be like young girls. But like Matt Smith, for instance, is playing Daemon Targaryen in all periods of the timeline because he doesn't look that much different 10 years on. As confusing as it sounds, the way that they present it in episodes is really easy to follow, so don't worry about it. All 3 of them, the younger actresses and Matt Damon, did a great job so far. There is a ton of table setting that they had to do to introduce you to all the new characters in episode 1, reintroduce you to all the big locations in Westeros. Like I said, things look very familiar, but they are very different at the same time. Paddy Considine was great as Viserys Targaryen. Rhys Ifans seems like he'll be really fun as Otto Hightower. Now, he's not like a Littlefinger type of character, but there are a lot of character traits that you see in people on the House of the Dragon show that will give you the same vibe as characters from Game of Thrones. The way they're presenting it, it's not like the main show where you had Starks versus Lannisters, like really good house against kind of a bad, despicable house. On House of the Dragon, it's more like bad people doing bad things to other bad people who themselves are also doing bad things. It's almost like the later seasons of Breaking Bad in that way, just a little bit, where you have like a character that you're rooting for, but they're also kind of doing bad stuff at the same time. One of the really cool things, though, is that just the overall tone of the episode, just the look, the feel, the way that they wrote everything, made it feel a lot like the early seasons of Game of Thrones, like Game of Thrones Season 1 and Season 2, when there was way more palace intrigue, and it was more of a show about just really, really good meetings, and they had also really big WTF stuff in the background. But easily one of the most noticeable upgrades that they've made is the visual style of the show. So if you watch House of the Dragon and then you go back and you watch the first couple of episodes of Game of Thrones, it makes the original show feel more like what you would expect a traditional TV show to feel like, and the look and feel of House of the Dragon just makes it feel more like an actual movie. Like just the physical way that they actually filmed the show just got a huge upgrade. They also gave the dragons a huge upgrade too, like metaphorical and literal, because all the dragons are meant to be way bigger than the dragons during the main Game of Thrones show, but also the way that they filmed them got a huge upgrade. They used some of the same technology that they used to film The Mandalorian with those LED stages to film their dragon scenes with them flying through the air, so it looks amazing. They did have some cool dragon scenes during the later seasons of Game of Thrones, but just on House of the Dragon in general, they look way, way better. So if you think that all the dragons look cool in episode 1, it's just going to get way, way crazier and way cooler in later episodes and later seasons when we meet all the other dragon seeds. There are supposed to be 17 dragons according to the showrunner, but I believe he also said that we wouldn't meet all 17 during season 1. But we'll see way more than what they've revealed in trailers so far. The only ones we've seen in the trailers, I believe, are Syrax, Rhaenyra's dragon, Caraxes, Daemon's dragon, Vhagar, and Balerion the Black Dread. And with Balerion, it's only his skull because he's meant to have died years before the events of episode 1. There are a couple new concepts that they introduced during this show that they only hinted at during the main show, so like the lore gets a little bit deeper in a really cool way. I'll explain what's going on with that more when the actual episodes are released publicly in a couple weeks. And even though the show is all about this Targaryen civil war with Targaryen versus Targaryen, bad person versus bad person all within their family, they do some table setting in episode 1 to set up other tertiary villains that are outside their family. So like this isn't completely just totally focused tunnel vision on the Targaryens, like there's a lot of other stuff going on around them. Because part of the idea is that a lot of alliances will change over time, the way that people feel about other characters will change. Remember, it's going to be like 10 years later in the timeline in the later episodes. A lot of you asking what was going on with the intro, do they have a new theme song? I can't really get into too many spoilers or anything like that, but they did open the show with like a totally different type of intro. I don't want to talk too specifically about it. but it felt totally different from the way that they opened the original Game of Thrones show, and I don't know if they're going to do it the same way for all the episodes or if it was just a thing that they did for episode 1. A lot of you may have seen that Ramin Djawadi came back to do all the music for House of the Dragon. It sounds very familiar. There are a lot of remixed themes from the main show. So during specific parts of the episode, you will hear very familiar sounding theme songs, but it is brand new music. They use a lot of the music to reference stuff from the main show in Game of Thrones too, like little music cues that are directly taken from the main show. Overall, I really like the episode. I think I'm going to really like the series. I've only seen episode 1, so I can't say too much about the later episodes, but it just feels like it's going to be a really strong show, so I am really excited about that. They did say that there were going to be several more trailers before episode 1 is actually released publicly, so I will do more House of the Dragon videos when we get those. And of course, I'll do regular episode videos like I did for the main show, bonus videos. So if you have any special requests or any big questions, just write them below in the comments. Everyone click here for my big House of the Dragon trailer breakdown and Easter eggs, and click here for my Black Panther Wakanda Forever trailer breakdown and Marvel Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.